Hello everyone, is Bringonthechaos Glizzy for another What If Naruto grown to be the most deadly assassin of all the three elemental nation. Before we start, can you like and subscribe for more What If you wanted to request a new series, and if you wanted this fanfic to have full series, please comment 3 hearts and say your fanfic that you wanted. Chapter 1. Sapphire blue eyes shined brightly in the darkness. The moon hung overhead, red and ripe like an apple. For the past 100 years a great war was being fought, one that seemed to never end. It was considered the bloodiest war that had ever taken place. Disorder ran through the cities as the advancing troops of the dreaded nation marched on their lands and took and destroyed and raped without mercy. In the opening of the war, thousands were brutally murdered. The war itself was a testament to their trust and faith in the power of the celestial being that was chosen through the cycle of the 4 elements that the people controlled. The Fire Nation, the strongest and most technological among the 4 elements, did as their element did. They spread like a wildfire. The people of the Fire Nation controlled the element of fire and were able to bend it to their will through the art of firebending, a dangerous and deadly art of combat. This single nation went and challenged the rest of the world, first taking out the air nomads, a peaceful group of airbenders. The reason they were hit first was because of the cycle of the Avatar, who, after dying, would be reborn as an air nomad. They were whipped out in a single day. From there they moved to the Earth Kingdom, striking hard and fast against considerably the strongest nation. They were able to drive them to their knees, but this nation was strong and for the last 100 years had put up a valiant fight against them. Their last bastion of hope resided in the great city of Ba Sing Sa. But even this great city was being attacked by tactical minds so far above them that they were fearful that it would collapse. They were in luck after the famed Dragon of the West lost his son and also lost his reason for fighting. When the war had first started, no one really came to help. Treaties were assigned, but the Avatar, a wise, spiritual, and powerful man gifted with the ability to bend all 4 elements and speak with the spirits, was the real cornerstone to all of this. Nations spoke out, rose up, and challenged him or her because they wanted to fight and take land that didn't belong to them. The Avatar was tasked with fighting these advances off by any possible means. But with the previous Avatar's death, the Fire Nation was able to run amok, striking at the next nation to have him. The Earth Kingdom got very little help from anyone. The people of the northern and southern water tribes were isolated by vast oceans and were slow to respond, near causing the defeat of the Earth Kingdom in several areas. But taking soldiers from their main cities had also cost them. The Fire Nation had planned on this and attacked without mercy against them as well. It took time, but the Northern Water Tribe was soon brought to their knees and their fabled waterbending, an art of combat, was lost. No more waterbenders lived in the Northern Water Tribe. The Southern Water Tribe was a different story. They didn't get attacked day after day. It took time for the Fire Nation to get to them. Spread too thin, the element of surprise was lost and they could do nothing against them. Water was the natural enemy to fire. They could do nothing but sit back and poke at them from time to time. After decades of fighting, the face of the war changed to the faces of the young. They were manipulated into believing that the war they were fighting was for peace and to share the greatness with the world. The sad truth was that the Fire Lord that had started the war truly saw it as that. He wanted to share the greatness with the world. But peace was not without danger and misunderstanding. He started the war, using the idea of sharing greatness and peace as a way to take better land and minerals and food. But as the face of the war changed, so too did the tactics. Mercenaries, soldiers that didn't like the way the battles were being fought, kids that lost their families to the war, adventurers and bandits, all created groups that would work for money or whatever they could get their hands on to fight the good fight, some siding with the Fire Nation. Guerrilla warfare became the norm. These mercenaries that had no combat training fought in ways that both annoyed and frightened everyone that had to deal with them. These groups were able to deal crippling blows to the Fire Nation, tripling their supply chain by cutting them off at key points, destroying munitions factories and other key things that they had set up. They did the jobs that no general wanted to send his soldiers on. Among all the groups that fought against them, assassins were the most feared. Silent, deadly, precise, and had a base of operations that no one knew of, they were the real threat in the night against anyone. They took jobs on both sides, mostly siding against the Fire Nation. They worked in pairs and small teams, capable of doing what no ordinary soldier or bender could do. They took back towns, pushed back advancing lines, and killed political figureheads that stuck their heads out too far. In less than a year they had done what no other organization could achieve. Total fear of all nations. But they were always at risk with other things. A war always had rules. The world itself was based on rules. But these rules were never heeded. A rule to not kill healers on the battlefield was easily ignored, just as killing innocent civilians was. Assassins may have been feared, but they were hated on both sides for one very important reason: they pinned the blame on others, innocent villagers and anyone else, to cover their tracks. Morals were thrown out the window and stomped on by them. Assassins had no morals. "I'm taking out the target," the Sapphire-18 thought. "I know. How many times must we go over it?" His companion replied. The Sapphire-18 gave him a hard look and then looked back down at the village. Morals were about to be broken again. The Fire Nation had taken over this small little fishing village as a means of bringing in their forces and supplies that would then be transported via their tanks and other supply routes. This small fishing village had been taken over recently after the Earth Kingdom was forced to pull out. What few people remained were loyal only out of fear. This supply line itself was too strong and shortened the distance traveled to their siege line at Ba Sing Sa. This supply line had to fall or the walls of Ba Sing Sa were going to crumble in a matter of months. However, attacking them and killing the main set of guys in charge would lead to questions and speculations. This would then force them to turn the gaze upon the only people to do this, the people of the small town. Morals are a thing of the past, Naruto, easily forgotten during war but always remembered at the end of it. "Be silent, Zentai," Naruto hissed at him. Though they were connected mentally through his mental link, Naruto felt the need to silence him. Having someone in his head, and no Kyuubi, was always strange. He had enough voices in there already at times. He could go without any more. "I'll have this done in a matter of minutes. Just stand by and get ready to evacuate after he's dead." Naruto emerged from the shadows and glanced up at the metal ship that sat anchored to the dock. It was a large and ugly thing, but it got all the jobs down they were slated with. Naruto dropped into the water after taking a breath and began the slow process of swimming towards the entry point. All reports said that thing was manned by a crew of 20. They'd be changing shifts for the night and perfect for boarding and assassination their target. With the Avatar still dead, some saying that he had died when the Fire Nation destroyed all the air temples, it fell to the rest of the world to take up arms and stand against this treat. Some believed that he was alive, but Naruto doubted it. With the information network that they had, they would have found him by now and he would be doing his job. This was his mess as far as Naruto was concerned. Even here there was no such thing as peace. He emerged from the dark waters and shoved down on the water like he was pushing on solid earth. His ability to use ninjutsu was shot. No longer could he use his Rasengan or the senjutsu skills he had learned. His ability to walk on water and on stick to all objects remained, along with his famous Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, but the latter could only create a few. Henge was still possible, but he very seldom needed it. All other aspects of his chakra worked in enhancing his speed, endurance, and strength. So with him in the blind spot of the ship he was easily able to not only stand on top of the water but also walk up the side of the ship without being detected. Reaching the top, he looked around and spied only 2 guards with their backs to him. They were talking about something concerning the supply line when Naruto got behind them and slit their throats. He jumped over the edge of the boat and slowly took them down in the water that would now be the graves. Once he was topside he began climbing towards the bridge of the ship where the captain was. He was a late worker from what their information said. It didn't take Naruto long to find him. He was talking to one of his men at the moment. It took 10 minutes but he was eventually alone. Naruto took that moment to strike. It was very clear that the captain saw him as he appeared behind in his final moments. Naruto was dressed like a shadow figure. He wore a white set of robes with a leather belt to hold it all together. Long sleeves covered by thick leather armguards protected most of his forearm. His face was almost completely concealed by the small hood that covered his head. Were it not for his present angle, the captain might have never gotten the chance to see the face of his killer. In the blink of an eye the knife was planted in his throat and yanked sideways to cut his jugular and throat wide open. He gurgled once, tried to hold it closed, but the deed was already done. A second strike, one to his heart, finished the job and he collapsed to the ground dead. Naruto dropped the knife, leaving it as evidence to accuse the villagers. He didn't feel anything anymore. He'd been doing this for years. Anyone could grow used to anything. Leaving the same way he came in, he felt the touch of Zentrai's mind in his own. Job's done. Let's get on the boat and get moving. How much are they paying us for this? Why don't we just kill him when we get there? I'd rather not die before the war ends. And someone just as evil would take his place. Now saddle up. We've got a boat to catch and a Fire Lord to meet. Naruto gave the dead captain one last look before he jumped out the window and began the long trip towards the docks that were 30 miles away. Their next job could very well be their last. Years of working for the Fire Nation and killing them was about to pay off. No one got a job to work for the Fire Lord, but they were recommended by famed generals that had hired them for things that they wouldn't have their own men do. They were now given a chance to either end the war or continue letting it go just to get closer to the Fire Lord and end him. Chapter 2. Naruto gave Zentrai a sharp glare for his words as they moved onto the Fire Nation ship. Zentrai was smiling from ear to ear, something that was only caused when sex, women, or money was involved. His words, though unspoken, were still ringing through Naruto's head, much to his annoyance at the moment. You should keep your thoughts to yourself, Zentrai. Do you want everyone to know you're a telepath? Zentrai just shrugged his shoulders and watched the guard escort them to their quarters aboard their ship. They are to be treated like kings, the Fire Lord had said. If they are unhappy, you will all perish in a sea of flames. Naruto figured that Zentrai would try and get him to do strange things for his amusement. He'd already picked out 2 girls he wanted to have sex with just to say he banged a chick from every element. The fact that he was wooing them with his telepathy, something he was born with, wasn't the problem though. The problem was the fact that he was doing that and messing with every girl he came across. If it wasn't for the warning from the current Fire Lord, Naruto was certain his friend would be getting slapped and burned at the same time. They were led to a single room with 2 big beds. Clearly this ship was meant for the personal transport and nothing else. Although it was loaded with soldiers, none of them actually seemed to be well endowed when it came to fighting. The 2 had asked for a demonstration earlier and were treated to 2 buffoons that had no idea what the basics were in firebending. Although Naruto and Zentrai weren't firebenders, they at least had some grasp on the concept of firebending. But the room was rather nice, although overly decorated for their liking. Fire emblems hanged from the walls and the smooth surface beneath their feet was lined with wool in the form of a rug that stretched under both beds. It was nice to actually sleep on a bed rather than a futon in Naruto's mind. Plus it was even better that Zentrai didn't have a girl in his arms, yet. "This is your room, Uzumaki," the man said politely and with a ting of fear in his voice. Naruto smirked and the man gulped. "If you need anything, please let me, or one of the servants, know and we will be happy to help." He bowed and took his leave, shutting the door on the way out. Naruto shrugged and turned towards the closest bed. Of course Zentrai was already in it with his gear lying on the floor. Naruto shook his head and removed his cloak and hood, revealing long blonde hair that had grown to the base of his neck. His bangs threatened to cover his eyes when he untied the band that held his hair in a ponytail. Tossing his bag to the side of the other bed, he plopped down and stared up at the ceiling. "You think the mission is to capture someone or kill someone?" Zentrai asked. No matter how long Naruto had spent with him, his manner of speaking still creeped him out for 2 reasons. The first reason was that Kyuubi had always been some sort of a deterrent when it came to people that wanted in his mind. He remembered Orochimaru appearing in his mind and being shoved out. He even remembered Sasuke appearing in his mind and shutting down the Kyuubi. But even with all of that, his mind was still, or was supposed to be, not readable. And yet Zentrai could do it. But then again, he no longer held Kyuubi anymore. Kyuubi was gone, but the power that it once held, the power that was now inside of him, was still Kyuubi's. His essence, his power, his traits still remained. When Naruto slept at night he could still hear his laughter, his voice, and his irritated breathing from being caged. Naruto didn't even know why it was in him, to be honest. But that didn't matter to him anymore. Kyuubi was gone, and he was here in this strange world that wasn't quite as strange as it once was. The second reason it freaked him out was because of how well Zentrai could do it. It was natural to him, but it was a part of his legacy after all. Zentrai was an odd person. Naruto remembered their first meeting. It was 4 years ago and Zentrai was actually considered a prodigy for his skills as a magnetism bender. He could levitate metal objects and throw them at people with remarkable speed. Naruto sometimes forgot that he actually was covered with small weapons that were kept razor sharp and weighed practically nothing. He was a very quiet person that did everything he was told. At the time though he was only 16 and out on his own. That was 4 years ago and now he was, well, there was no true way to describe him actually. But his two abilities came with a price. He was a mute by nature. His vocal cords never developed, just like the rest of his people. During the first and second avatars, a family of firebenders and earthbenders had come together and summoned a spirit to aid them in giving them a new power. The spirit, while the name was forgotten to all but time, had granted them this gift with a smile, stating that their firstborn children would have the gift that they had wanted. Nearly a year later, the firstborn came and had indeed inherited the gift of magnetism bending, but didn't have the ability to speak. Angry, they re-summoned the spirit and demanded an explanation. The spirit replied that a power such as this must always come at a cost. For his bending and his talents as a bender, his vocal cords were destroyed before he was born. Grief-stricken, the father, a firebender, spent years trying to find a way to heal his son with no luck in sight. It was only by chance that his great-grandson, a young boy with a promising future, had managed to actually speak, but with his mind. By utilizing the electromagnetic waves in his body, he was able to transfer his thoughts through the electromagnetic brain waves and became the first telepath. But not everyone looked kindly to this, and his family, after years of talking like this, had been brought to their knees and killed off out of fear. But not all of them had died. The current avatar had arrived and saved them, sheltering them from those that would wish them harm. Knowing that it would be dangerous to be in a group, they split when they were old enough and died happily after having kids that soon roamed the world looking for their place in the world. With the mixture of blood that was passed from generation to generation, this ability had become something of a special gift that very few could unlock. The chances were about 1 in 100, if not 1,000. The Fire Nation had a better chance of having it in this army than the Water Tribes or Earth Kingdom did, but as of yet there had been no sighting of a magnetism bender other than Zentrei, and no one knew that he even was one. Naruto gave his comrade a shrug as he watched him push a strand of his brown hair out of his chocolate-brown eyes. "I have no idea," he said openly as the door was slowly opened. A worried-looking guard stood in the doorframe, his eyes shifting between the two. "Make it fast or I'm going to kill you," Naruto said quietly. The guard hastily jumped out of the way as two very large animals walked, one of them soaked with blood while the other held what looked like a human arm. "Shibaru, Rai, where have you been?" The two animals quickly replied by jumping onto their masters. Shibaru jumped on top of Zentrei, covering him in blood, much to Naruto's amusement. Shibaru and Rai were both the size of a Kamaru, Kiba's company. However, they both looked different. Shibaru had a dog appearance, with thick brown fur and two long bones that stuck up from her shoulder blades. The brown fur followed around the two appendages and masked the bones with a thin layer of flesh. White markings ran over her hips, front legs, and parts of her head, almost as if bone were not covered entirely by her flesh. Her tail was puffy and sometimes looked like it was made of 3 tails rather than 1. And around her paws, her fur was long and floated upwards like a flame. The only thing about her that wasn't dog-like were the 2 long whiskers that came down from the back of her jawline and the unusual large ears that looked cat-like. Add on the strange glowing white eyes, and it was no wonder the guard was somewhat frightful of her. And as for Rai, who now sat before Naruto with the human arm in his mouth, it was easy to understand just why anyone would be frightful of him. He was more cat-like with white fur, long ears, two massive fangs that stuck out of his mouth, glowing red eyes, and red bones that actually stuck out of his flesh, 3 on the front legs, 1 on the back leg, and a dozen running down his spine. In the center of his head, like Shibaru, there was a tribal design of what looked like a star. On the left side of his head just beside the left ear was a long red horn that curled back like a goat's horn. Naruto gave the guard a sharp glance. "What did you do?" The guard started to panic. Naruto reached into his pocket and produced a small thin blade. "Tell me, or I start cutting off digits." "We didn't know they were yours and we were going to use them for Furko." Naruto jammed the thin blade into his jugular and killed him. He dropped dead on the spot, leaving the teen shaking his head. "How could they not know you two belonged to us?" he asked. They just looked at him. Well, Rai started to wag his tail a bit. Naruto took that as a good sign. "Oh well. No point crying over spilt milk, I guess. We should call one of the guards to have them take the body away." Naruto poked his head and called for some help. A while later, 2 guards appeared and took the body away while another came to clean up the mess. As the guards left and shut the door, Naruto was left scratching at the side of his head. "Good girl," Zentrei said. Shibaru licked him clean of the blood and then shook the rest of it off, showering the place in blood. Naruto shot the creature a hard glare before running his head over his face to clean the blood from his eyes. Zentrei laughed mentally, allowing all 3 to catch it. "Good girl. I hate you." Naruto walked out to find a bathroom to clean up. When the ship entered the dock, the first thing that everyone was greeted by were terrified guards leading the assassin brothers off the ship with their 2 pets in tow. The 2 were dressed in their assassin's clothing, both opting to wear them since this was technically a mission, and it was always best to show up ready. But for them it came with a price. Some of the soldiers looked ready for a fight, and most of those present were the Imperial Firebenders that were exceptionally strong and well advanced in the ways of firebending. But since they were here to take a mission from the Fire Lord, no one dared to attack them. But Naruto and the 2 pets could easily hear what they were saying about them. "It's the Demon Brothers," one of them whispered. "What are the Twin Devils doing here?" "It's the Bloody Inferno and Silent Death." The names went on and on. The 2 had quite a reputation, one that didn't actually make sense. They never truly had a team name, but they did at the same time. It was given to them by a group of Water Tribe members that they had once done business for, and that name seemed to just stick. They were known as the Assassin Brothers, but they weren't brothers. In fact, it was easy to tell they weren't related by any means. Naruto's hair was blonde and his eyes were blue. Zentrai's eyes were chocolate brown and his hair was dark brown that was long enough to cover his eyes. And as for the personal nicknames, Naruto didn't care for them at all. He was used to earning such things. His time spent as a ninja of Konoha before ending up here was one blessing out of many that he had from back then. After spending years being called a demon and a monster, he just grew used to it all and accepted it. He understood you couldn't fully change the minds of those around you, but it was still annoying to have to hear someone of them. "Bloody Inferno," Zentrei said. Naruto snorted at the name. "Last time I checked, that power doesn't burn anyone." But there is no denying the bloody part in the name. Naruto ignored his friend's comment but still found it hard not to laugh. Sentry did have a point. The power that earned him that nickname was very strange to everyone. Usually when they did business with a client they often asked or beat around the bush at least on the question of that power. Naruto's answer had always been the same. "I'm a ninja," he would say. That usually got the point across. No one dared to question him on it and no dared to ask where he came from. What few ninjas there were in the world often chose to keep to themselves and away from others. If there was ever a one that got paired up with someone for combat, it was generally someone they knew from childhood or was someone they cared for deeply. The two walked behind two of the Imperial Firebenders that were leading them to the Fire Lord. Like most of the Firebenders, they wore the traditional firebending uniform and armor that covered everything from view. But as they followed them, Naruto had a nagging sensation that he knew at least one of them and suddenly stopped. Almost as if the guard could predict the future, he turned around and stared at him. "Do I know you?" Naruto asked. The guard shook his head slowly. His hesitation wasn't one of fear. Naruto's eyes narrowed on him. "If you're going to try and kill me, do it now while you have the chance." The man remained standing and turned to his buddy for a moment. "Did I kill your father?" "My brother, actually." He spoke heatedly. Naruto snorted. "He was a good man and you killed him. Why? Why are you fighting in this war?" The man looked disgruntled if his body language were to answer anything for him. Naruto shoved past him and the lone firebender led him the rest of the way. That was a bit harsh. Naruto snorted when Zentrai's voice entered into his mind. "You don't like what we do, yet you do it anyways. Why is that?" Naruto remained silent, his mind blank. Sentry took it as the silent treatment and shook his head suddenly. It looked strange to anyone watching them at the moment. There was a difference between shaking your head to clear your thoughts and one of confusion during a conversation. And his was definitely from confusion during a conversation. "I suppose I'll never fully understand you," he confessed. The blonde had nothing to say. Sentry once more shook his head as they followed the firebender through a set of chambers. On the wall, paintings of the previous Fire Lords decorated the walls, their forms towering over them like a god looking down on ants with the power to kill or save them. The firebender they followed didn't give moment to pause as they passed the last one, a picture of the current Fire Lord Ozai. Naruto glanced at it and began trying to remember the bounty on this man's head. Ozai was very young looking, dressed in formal robes, and had slick back black hair with a long pointy beard that hung from his chin. The painter had clearly gotten a good image of the man. With the way he was drawn, he looked like a gift from heavens, their savior, and the nicest person in the world. But there was no hiding what he truly was. Ozai was a monster following the path of his forefathers before him. He burned and banished his firstborn son, Prince Zuko. He continued the campaign to take over all the other nations to share the greatness with the world. He wasn't supposed to take up the throne, but he did. His wife had vanished shortly before the death of the previous Fire Lord. Naruto debated with Zentrai once that Ozai had killed her, but Zentrai took up for Ozai stating that he was a monster, but doing that would have been difficult for him to hide from the world and possibly just left and went into hiding. But Ozai's list of dirty deeds never seemed to end actually. The firebender suddenly stopped before two more Imperial firebenders that gave them quick glances. A large golden door with red trim to it stood before them, and the two guards turned and slowly opened the doors to allow them entrance. They entered and were graced with the sight of red and yellow flames that increased and decreased in size depending on how Ozai breathed. There were more firebenders that gave them harsh glares. Like the others, these were Imperial firebenders and meant to guard the Fire Lord with their lives if anyone ever attacked him. The Fire Lord was right to have such people here. The bounty on his head was twice that which they were about to get paid. But there was an interesting catch to his bounty that would, under normal circumstances, make anyone else mad. Zuko and Azula both had bounties on their head which were 4 times as much as his own. The 3 firebenders that had followed them in quickly bowed. Ozai smiled briskly for a moment, bathing in the glory and power that he had. But his smile turned into a frown when Naruto and Zentrai remained standing. "You should bow to our Fire Lord," one of the guards spoke heatedly. "No. I bow to no one. Client or otherwise," Naruto said simply. The Fire Lord, for strange reasons, looked pleased just to hear that. With a wave of his hand the firebenders left him. They knew that he could easily handle these two if they dared to attack him. When the guards left, Naruto took a deep breath and began the usual question and answering bit. "Do you have a picture of our target?" "Yes." Ozai snapped his fingers and unseen servant appeared holding a scroll. He presented it to Naruto and the blonde snatched it up. He quickly skimmed over it and stared at the kid that was on the scroll. He had to be 12, maybe younger, with a bald head that bore an arrow tattoo, a staff in hand, and simple shirt and pants to match. He looked ordinary and weak to Naruto. Ozai suddenly inhaled and the flames increased in size for a brief moment. "I trust you can complete this without a problem." "Of course." Naruto rolled up the scroll and put it into his pack on his back. "But I do have a question for you." Ozai didn't look pleased by this, but allowed it. "Where was the last spot our target was seen at?" Ozai closed his eyes in thought before answering. "He was last seen at the Northern Water Tribe. But I doubt he'll be there for much longer." Naruto's eyes narrowed for a moment. "He's the leader of a rebel faction that poses a great threat to our glorious nation. His rebel faction has already taken back a few villages and our soldiers are spread too thin at the moment. I'm aware that you've done business with other nations, and I assure you, if you can complete this, I will personally see to it that you are well taken care of for the rest of your lives. However, you are to kill the target and bring his body back to us if you can't take him alive. Do you have a preference for the status of the target?" "Alive will get you more money," Ozai answered quickly and sharply. "But if you cannot, dead will be fine." Naruto nodded and gave his comrade a quick glance. "I do have a request for you though. I wish for you to work with my daughter, Azula. You will have free reign to do as you please during your hunt for the target. Azula is currently hunting down my brother and her brother, Zuko and Iroh. My sources tell me that they were last seen on an island not too far from here. It's a resort of sorts that belongs to us, but is still not part of the Fire Nation directly. You can find them there. Am I to assume you don't have transportation for us? I will have one of my ships leave as soon as you are ready. They should get you to your destination in less than 2 days. 2 days on a boat with Zentrai and Shibaru are enough to get me angry with him. Can I make a request?" Ozai nodded. I would appreciate if you could get a crew of only men. There is to be no alcohol of any kind as well. Can you make this happen? I hate you. Sentry snapped mentally. I will see to it, Ozai replied briskly. He made sure to give the two a strange glance as a result. Naruto didn't mind the glance. In fact, it looked sort of funny on him. Sentry was left scowling as a result. Is there anything else you wish to have on the ship? Naruto looked down at Rai and then to Shibaru. Lots of meat if you don't want the crew to be eaten. Ozai nodded again, and with the dealing done, Naruto and Sentry, their two pets included, turned and walked out. When the guards returned and shut the door, Naruto was left snickering. That's for letting Shibaru cover me with blood. Sentry continued to scowl at him. The ship wouldn't be ready for until tomorrow, so with that in mind, Naruto decided to spend the day looking at weapons and just shopping. It wasn't like he got the opportunity to shop in the Fire Nation every day, so he simply made the most of it. Sentry had decided to find the nearest brothel and bang every chick in it. Naruto knew him well enough to know that he'd get the job done. His record at pleasing multiple women at a time was outstanding by his records, but Naruto believed that if you needed more than one woman to make you happy, you were clearly an idiot. Still, Sentry wasn't about to spend the entire time having sex. He had other things on his mind besides sex, and it still included a brothel. Naruto knew what he was doing, but it still annoyed him to know how his comrade thought. I suppose it can't be helped, Naruto thought to himself. He walked into the shade of a tent over a produce stand and stared at the object the vendor was selling. Jewelry, small weapons, and fancy silk threads lined his stand. The blonde reached out and grabbed one of the tiny weapons. It was a tiny dagger that was primarily given to women for self-defense. Naruto put it back and went back to his task of killing time. Rai suddenly started whining and Naruto smirked. Are you hungry, boy? Rai opened his mouth as if to yawn. That was his way of saying yes. Naruto ruffled his head, making sure to miss the horn and ears. He was very sensitive about anyone touching his ears or horn. Naruto was the only one to do this, however. Rai just liked him that way. It was sort of like a scratch behind the ears for him. He enjoyed it when it came from his master and killed anyone else that dared try to do it. Looking around, Naruto soon found a small restaurant that was open and allowed pets. Walking into the restaurant, he was greeted by two big men that stared down at his pet. We don't like strangers bringing in pets. So get out. The tallest one barked. Naruto eyed him for a moment and then snorted. You do realize that that doesn't make sense, right? The two men inhaled deeply, puffing out their chests to look more opposing. Naruto rolled his eyes as a result. The only reason you don't like me is because I've either killed someone important to you or a friend of a friend that you know. And if that's the case, why would you wanna start a fight with me? That doesn't make sense. And I've got the protection of the Fire Lord right now for a mission I've taken up. So why are you picking a fight with me? The two men looked confused for a moment. One of looked like they were going to answer when they suddenly stopped and just tried to hit him. Naruto calmly moved to the side and let the man stumbled out of the way. He turned to fight him when Rai took a bite out of his ass. A really big bite, actually. He fell to the ground with both ass cheeks missing and blood pooling on the floor. He screamed loud and long as Rai gobbled down the chunk of flesh in his mouth. "Are you gonna let me in now, or do I let Rai finish eating your friend?" Naruto asked calmly. His buddy moved out of his way and Naruto whistled for Rai to follow. He followed, but walked over the man's back, his long claws extended for maximum bitch effect. He trotted up behind his master and sat next to his master when he selected a table. Everyone in the restaurant kept the gaze on Naruto as he ordered for himself and Rai. When the food came, Rai savagely ate up his food while Naruto poked at his. He soon realized that he wasn't hungry and let Rai eat it. Paying his tab, he left the restaurant for some fresh air. Sentai turned and waved to the girls with a big smile. Being a mute had its advantages, and one of them was always winning girls over with his inability to talk. They felt sorry for him and so they often did what he asked, even if they didn't understand why they wanted to do it. Sentai's way of talking wasn't just a way of interacting with people. It was his way of also sharing emotions. People can say things like, "I'm sorry," or "I love you," and simply say it without meaning it. But with the way he talked, not only did his words echo into their minds, his emotions did as well. It was a little hard to explain, but it was easy for him to understand. It would be like a person that was color-blind trying to have someone explain what the color red was, or what something smelled like to someone that didn't have a sense of smell. One can't simply describe it to another, they had to experience it themselves to understand it. And that was how he was generally able to get into anyone's pants. If he said he loved you, his emotions went with it, and they too sort of fell for him as well. There was that and the fact that he had Shibaru along for the ride. His pet was also a way of getting into someone's pants. No matter how scary Shibaru was, she absolutely loved attention, and could easily get girls for his master to have fun with. The strange beast could win over all girls with her cuteness, which Naruto swore wasn't there, just like most guys did when they saw her. But one could saw the same for Rai as well. Guys saw him and freaked. Girls saw him and wanted to ride on his back. As he left, he was left with the thoughts of what Shibaru was going through. Being a telepath had many advantages, and one of them was reading what was on the minds of everyone. He could easily block them and his own thoughts as well. Anything he used to think up was instantly transmitted, but not any longer. Now he could think without transmitting what he was thinking, and block the thoughts of those around him if he wanted to. Rai and Shibaru were actually spirits that had given up their immortality to die here in this land. They wanted to move on, and had allowed other spirits to take their place. They had lived for eons now and merely wanted to move on after forging a life of their own. Shibaru and Rai weren't their real names however. They had had many names, but Shibaru and Rai were the newest ones, and thus were called that. They had infested two dying animals, both of which came from the desert, and changed them to their liking. There would be no other breed like them. Naruto and Zentai had come across them during a mission back when they still had their third teammate with them. The two spirits had infested the bodies before their eyes as the two creatures neared death. After consuming the bodies and changing them to their liking, they were quickly aware that the bodies that inhabited needed food and drink. Naruto, ever stupid at that point in time, had ran up to them with a big goofy smile and presented his water pouch to them. Rai was hesitant but soon drank from it while Shibaru was left questioning his actions. After drinking his fill, Naruto had presented Rai with some jerky and instantly won his heart over. And with Rai in tow as his pet, Shibaru was left wondering about Zentrei. Zentrei, after realizing that she was a girl, had quickly done the same and won her over. And after a quick trip back to town, the two pets became lifelong friends with them after being fed lots of meat and drink. And now they were their partners in crime, so to say. If one of them got angry, generally the master got angry as well and beat that person down. "Are you hungry, girl? Food!" Shibaru's mind screamed. Laughing, he motioned for her to follow as they made their way through the small market. There was a big guy mourning at the door of a restaurant that was cleaning up a mass of blood on the ground. Shibaru took a single sniff and declared, "Rai's been here," as she trotted past the man. He nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw her and watched the two take the same seats Naruto and Rai had. A terrified waitress came to serve them. Zentrei pointed to what he wanted and made it simple for the young woman. He didn't want to have sex right now. He was drained from having sex with 10 girls as it was, and simply used hand motions to tell the beautiful waitress what they wanted. She jotted it down and walked off, returning only 10 minutes later with a tray of food for the two. As was the custom, Shibaru ate all the meat while Zentrei nibbled on the side dishes. It was always best to not eat the food that was cooked without being able to watch it. And since Shibaru and Rai were fully healed spirits, the idea of someone making a poison strong enough to kill them was highly unlikely. After paying the tab and leaving to shop, Zentrei eyed the still crying man with remorse. He put a calming on his shoulder and flooded his mind with that feeling. The man tensed and then relaxed. All is right with the world. Zentrei sent him calmness again and the man smiled before narrowing his eyes. He backed up and ran to the back while Shibaru took a few sniffs of the blood that had seeped into the wood. "Let's go find Naruto and Rai. I'm sure they've already found a place to stay for the night." By the time it was time to leave, Naruto had done exactly what he planned on doing, spying on the Fire Nation. Just because he was doing a mission for them didn't mean he was working for them for the rest of his life. This was an enemy nation that had started a war and was about to win it. While it was a hard thing to resist killing the Fire Lord, Naruto knew that Azula, who was currently in line to receive the throne, would be far worse than he was. She would sooner set the world on fire just to watch it burn while Ozai just wanted to control it all. Zentrei had completed what he had wanted to do as well, bang a firebender. He had sex with at least 2 of them that were known firebenders and even admitted to it. The only sad thing was that one of them didn't shave. She just burned her hair off and was done with it, but she had horrid burns down there which made it hard for him to enjoy. The other thing he set out to do was easily put into place as well. And with his duty to the world complete, he had trucked off to find Naruto and get ready for the ride. After 2 days of sailing they eventually found who they were looking for. Azula, princesses of the Fire Nation, a prodigy firebender, and a total bitch now stood before them. Her imperial firebenders looked ready to attack. That was a good sign to both assassins. If the enemy was ready to attack you, they were the type to not have fear. Azula for the most part took pleasure behind her personal throne of curtains with Lee and Lo by her side. So, she spoke quickly, properly, and with a pride in her voice. "My father has sent you two to help me in capturing my brother and uncle, has he?" Naruto opened his mouth to speak. Do not speak to me until I tell you to speak. We're here only to capture or eliminate our target. The fact that we're on your ship is only because your father has sent too many of his ships out to sea and cannot afford to waste any more of his precious resources. Naruto said sternly. He could see her eyes boring through the cloth of her curtains with ease. If he had to guess, they'd burst into flames any moment now with the way she was glaring at him. And for the record, I'm not taking orders from a spoiled little bitch like you. 2 Imperial Firebenders rose up to challenge them. Did I order you to stand? She snapped suddenly. The 2 men quickly took their spots up again and knelt before her. I see you know about the scroll my father sent me. A grin played on her lips. I am under orders of my father to not get in your way, but you are to work with me. You have been ordered to track down a target that is considered a secondary target to me at the moment. I am to let you do all the work from what father said in his letter. When it comes to combat, we are to work as one and all tactics go to me. But I am to understand that I am to not get in your way. Is this right? Our target is ours, not yours. If you try to take it, you will be getting in our way. We are to do this our way, not yours. You have only the power to choose how we get to our targets, nothing more and nothing less. Naruto looked at the 20 Imperial Firebenders that all knelt before her. I wonder how many of them have lost precious people to us. More than you'd like to know right now, Zentrai replied. Naruto kept his gaze with Azula as she started twirling one of her long bangs in her fingers. She almost seemed pleased to hear him standing up to her. But Naruto knew it was a facade. She didn't like him, and Naruto knew that she knew he didn't like her either. They were on even ground with that. Both would leave each other alone so long as neither of them go in their way or ask too many questions. I trust your guards will behave enough to not try and kill us in our sleep. None of the guards moved or flinched at the way Naruto spoke of them. Azula actually smirked at the way he spoke of them. He made them seem like idiots that were unworthy of their titles. Some of them were veterans that had fought in the war and come back as heroes before their skills became high enough to become what they were. For Naruto to even make a mockery of them was a bad thing. You have my word that they will do you no harm. Her grin increased. Before you are seen to your quarters, I request a demonstration of your skills so I know what I'm working with. It will make both our jobs easier. Ladies first, Naruto snapped quickly. He didn't like the idea of showing off his powers. Azula didn't mind. I can shoot blue fire and I'm near master level. I can even shoot lightning. Naruto wasn't impressed. She wasn't the first firebender to use lightning, but she flaunted it as though she was. Now why don't you both be good little peasants and tell me what you can do? Her eyes danced to Zentrai. I wish to see you first. My friend is a mute that's both deaf and dumb. I use him as a distraction when I need to escape. Naruto cracked. I hate you. Zentrai snapped. But he does work for you. I wish to see what both of you can do. Telling me will get me nowhere. She raised one hand and the 20 firebenders rose. Please demonstrate your powers for me, or be burned alive. The blonde snorted inwardly. For the record, Naruto said mentally. I hate you and blame you for this. Zentrai just laughed as the two were forced to slip into their fighting stance. Naruto somehow knew that it would all play out like this. Azula was a cold and heartless bitch, but she was a tactician and she was going to be working with them. So knowing what they could do would help her in planning her moves. At least we're going to have some fun out of this. The 20 firebenders moved in and quickly swarmed them. Naruto was instantly on the offensive, countering them with high speeds that left a few stunned and even more of them angry. Zentai simply jumped to the side, over the boat, and then back up onto the deck. Azula watched them fight with both glee and disdain for her own guards. So far no one had been killed or hurt, but it was clear that the two assassins were more skilled than even her guards. Naruto had gotten in close to dozens of them and simply ducked and sidestepped their fire, even going as far as to have them hurt each other or themselves with their own attacks. Zentai just simply dodged them without much effort. He actually seemed to enjoy mocking them really with the way he hung back, his hands in his pockets and his eyes narrowed slightly on those trying to attack him. Realizing that she wasn't going to get anywhere with this, she hastily ordered them to fight to kill. That changed things up a lot. Where one or two firebenders would attack them in different sets, they now all openly attacked them, showing that they had either all lost someone they loved or knew to them, or knew someone that lost someone to them. And that was when things turned for the two. "Start killing 'em," Naruto ordered. Before the first firebender could attack him again, Naruto was in front of him, his speed near deafening to the men. He dropped dead before a second one fell before the feet of the blonde with thumb-sized holes in their jugulars or at the base of their skulls. With two already dead at the feet of the blonde and 8 remaining, Naruto carefully considered his options at the moment. The 8 Imperial Firebenders quickly attacked as one. The roar of their flames was unmatched by the screams and pleas of those that Zentai was crippling and leaving to be eaten by Shibaru and Rai. Naruto calmly sidestepped their combined attack, opened his hand, allowing 3 stiletto knives into his hands from his gauntlet, and threw them. Each blade pierced helmet at the eye hole and dropped the men as they screamed in pain. One of them fell face first and was killed when the knife skewered his brain. The other 2 tried to tear the knife out without removing their eye. Both failed and both soon had a torrent of blood draining down their masks. With 3 dead and 2 wounded, Naruto was already starting to wonder if Azula was going to call this off. He gave her a quick glance to sum her up. No, he thought to himself, she won't call this off. With the remaining 7 charging him, Naruto took a calming breath and brought his hands to the small of his back at his belt. He reached into his belt and pulled out 2 wickedly looking knives. They 7 firebenders did another combined attack. 2 of them shot flames down low against the metal hull of the deck. 3 shot out flames that would have been waist high while the remaining 4 burned the air over his head in case he tried jumping. With a calming breath, he threw the 2 knives at the 2 that had tried to attack low. The projectiles were embedded into their feet, pinning them in place. As the blades left his hands, he ducked and rolled back, evading the wall of fire. It passed overhead as he rose to his feet, his eyes burning brightly. The 2 on the ground pulled the knives out and shot 2 fireballs at him. The blonde sidestepped their attacks, twisted, and threw 2 more knives from his hand. They were quickly embedded into their throats, leaving them on the ground dead like their fallen comrades thus far. The 5 remaining men stopped their attack and surveyed the teen. Naruto knew they were thinking now. They wouldn't openly attack with reckless abandonment now. They'd think smart or smarter actually, and try to pin him down instead of just hoping to burn him down. Grinning his old prankster grin, the team took a deep breath and calmly pointed at them. "I think I've killed enough of you idiots. How about I end this with 2 moves?" They didn't hesitate to look at the fallen thus far. Seeing this, the blonde decided to hold true to his words and formed a very familiar seal. "Shadow Clone no Jutsu," he whispered. 5 bangs and 5 identical teens stood before them. The men looked ready to attack. Move 1 and now move 2. Naruto and his clones brought their hands together into a different seal. "Sexy no Jutsu," he declared with a smile. There were 6 puffs of smoke and the 6 very beautiful, very well endowed women standing before the 5 lone fighters. They didn't stand a chance. Spreading their legs, blowing kisses, and grabbing their breasts, it was no wonder they passed out after a dinging noise sounded from them. All but one of them did actually. "You've gotta be kidding me," the lone fighting said in shock as he looked at his companions. He turned back just in time to see Naruto, the girls gone and the clones missing, as he shoved his fist into his face, knocking him unconscious. With a snort, Naruto said, "Queer," as he turned to watch his friend fight while Azula gawked at his less than ideal way of ending the fight. Azula's eyes hastily snapped over to Zentrai as he continued playing with all 9 of his remaining opponents. Rai and Shibaru were currently hounding away on the poor soul that had been crippled and were eating him alive on the spot. Zentrai was smiling at his 9 opponents. They were using their heads and they weren't openly trying to incinerate him on the spot. Naruto figured that was always his luck. He got stuck dealing with the brutes while Zentrai got the smart ones that wanted to play it safe. One of them moved for a firebending strike. Zentrai was on him, his hand lashing out and grabbing his wrist to move the attack out of his way. Fire spewed into the air and the other 8 took a step back. Zentrai held onto the man's wrist as he presented his back to him and kicked him 3 times in the stomach before elbowing him in the face. A hidden blade extended and went into his brain through his eye. There was no cry of pain. He just dropped to the ground dead. The other 8 got ready to strike when Zentrai raised a hand and slapped it closed. They took a step back and 2 of them dropped with the blades from the fallen fighters Naruto dealt with in their spines. They were crippled now if not dead. 4 down in under a minute and the remaining 6 began to consider the option of not fighting him now. Azula would kill them if they disobeyed her orders. Without further thought they attacked as one. "Boring," Zentrai said silently to Naruto. He watched the wall of fire head straight towards. He ducked back, dodging it with ease and rose throwing senbon into their throats and eyes. They all dropped and Zentrai was left feeling dejected because of it all. "Next time I want your opponents. I like being a counter whore," he whined. Naruto mentally laughed at his friend's demise because of this. Realizing that they had won and did so with very little display of their abilities, they turned to Azula and waited for her to throw something new at them. She sat patiently behind her curtains and stared at them intently. Naruto wondered if she was trying to set them on fire with her gaze alone. She nodded and snapped her fingers. 10 more Imperial Firebenders appeared to haul of the dead while 2 hung back to guard her. "Your skills are beyond what I believed to be true. You do live up to your name as the Twin Slayers." Naruto rolled his eyes and chalked that name up as their 80th strange name. "These 2 men will see you to your quarters. I will explain what we'll be doing when you're ready." Naruto looked to Zentrai for a moment and then looked to Azula. "It doesn't matter if we're ready or not. Explain what you have planned now so we can be better prepared for it. Very well. She rose from her throne and stepped out into the orange light of the setting sun. She was the spitting image of her wanted posters and bounty posters all over the Earth Kingdom. She wore high-ranking armor, marking her as a member of the royal family, and robes underneath it. She was dressed like a warrior, and probably fought just as tough as the best of them. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a small bun to keep all but her two side bangs out of her face. If the devil were a human in disguise, she would be the first suspect in everyone's eyes. The royal procession is dead weight. If I wish to catch my prey, I must be agile, nimble. I'm going to need a small elite team to help me out. The first thing we're going to do is find some old friends. She waited to see what they'd have to say. Naruto had nothing to say, and with the other guy being a mute, she knew he'd have nothing to say. I intend to visit my old friends, Mai and Tai Li. They are childhood friends and will make my elite team. Each a skill that I value highly. If painting your nails and combing your hair is one of their skills, I won't recommend this. Naruto suddenly snapped. Any more women and you'd get ideas. Naruto thought up front so Zentrei could pick it up. The mute smiled for a brief moment. I assure you, their skills are not like that. Tai Li is a very agile and can block chi points in the human body, keeping anyone from bending or using their limbs. She is by far the strongest fighter that I know of that can't firebend. And as for Mai, she's far more skilled with projectiles than either of you. A thin blade barely missed the side of her cheek. It grazed her cheek but left no wound. Zentrei was the only one to have moved, and he didn't look pleased by that comment. You dare attack me? Zentrei doesn't like anyone thinking they're better than him when it comes to throwing weapons. Naruto spoke firmly for his friend. Just because he's a mute doesn't make him a complete idiot. He's very skilled when it comes to long-range weaponry. I haven't met anyone that can actually outdo him in his choice of class yet. Not like anyone can anyways with his style of bending. It makes it impossible for anyone to be better than him so long as metal is involved. See to it that he doesn't do it again. She snapped. She hurriedly turned and stormed into the ship, leaving her throne behind. The two assassins glanced at one another before sighing and shrugging their shoulders. Women were very hard to understand, no matter if they were human or otherwise. More women, Zentrei thought happily. I hope they put you in your place and not have sex with you. Naruto walked off, leaving his friend with his pet while Rai hurriedly joined the team.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like this video if you want some more what if video. Comment 3 hearts for more what if.